I am so excited for this episode of the Unmeasured podcast. I'm joined by one of my dear, wonderful friends who I don't get to see that often because we live far away from each other. So, this podcast will hopefully be really fun for you, but I know it's going to be really fun for us because it's our chance to catch up. I've got Sam Vander Wielen here on the podcast with me today. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Sim, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're here. If you do not know Sam, you are in for such a treat. If you've always associated attorneys with words like shark, intense, and cutthroat, you're in for a down to earth breath of legal fresh air. Sam Vander Wielen is a leading legal educator who's helped over, are you guys ready for this number? 150,000 online business owners set up their businesses legally, including mine. Sam's legal templates and signature program, The Ultimate Bundle, generate well over $1 million per year, making her podcast, On Your Terms, a goldmine for not only legal knowledge, but marketing know-how that actually works. This is really exciting news. You can pre-order Sam's upcoming book, When I Start My Business, I'll Be Happy, a practical, no BS guide to successful online entrepreneurship, now before its release on April 15th, 2025. In it, Sam presents her evergreen marketing strategies that led to her seven-figure success, as well as guidance on balancing building your business with life's curveballs. Sam lives on Long Island in New York with her husband, Ryan, Bernadoodle Hudson, and too many of her favorite mugs and a towering stack of fiction. Sam, you are so impressive. You're so amazing. And I know that we're going to get into a lot of, what you've experienced over the last couple years while you've simultaneously been running your incredible business and writing this book also, like all at the same time.
Yeah, it's been a lot. It's kind of funny for me to hear you read it back to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, all that happened.
I hope you feel so proud of yourself. I feel so proud of you. Sam, do you want to let everyone know where they can pre-order your book before we move any further? I just know everyone's going to want to get their hands on this.
Yeah, you can get my book When I Start My Business, I'll Be Happy anywhere that books are sold. But you can head to my website, samvanderwielen.com/book, because right now, if you go pre-order my book, you get exclusive access to two bonuses that won't be available if you don't pre-order. So you get invited to a virtual book club with me. Once the book comes out, I'm going to be walking people through the book and doing some kind of like business coaching in real time. And then also you get a mini course on how to add 2,000 email list subscribers to your email list that I've created for you. So head on over to samvanderwielen.com/book.
Well, I will definitely be doing that when we stop recording this podcast episode because those bonuses sound fantastic. And I have been counting down to get to read your book. We are going to be talking about what it takes to set goals and achieve your goals, but imperfectly along the way. And Sam, I really feel like there is no one more experienced in setting big, amazing goals and actually achieving them amidst all of life's circumstances than you. So when I got this question from a listener, I was like, Sam has got to be the one that I get to talk to about this. A listener wrote in and said, I really want to run my first half marathon this spring, but I'm so stressed that I won't be able to follow the training plan perfectly, and life will get in the way. I don't want to fail at this, but I also feel how I'm talking myself out of it before I even start. Any advice you have would be so helpful. So, Sam, I'd love for everyone who's tuning in and listening, can you just give a little overview of what the last couple years of your life have been, the goals that you've set, the things that you've achieved, including like an amazing race that you just recently completed?
Yeah, I left the law like Simi. I used to be an attorney as well, a practicing attorney, and then I left the law to start my own health coaching business, and like wasn't quite my right thing, but I also kept getting people reaching out to me being like, "Well, wait, what about the legal stuff?" And I decided to follow that. Long story short, I decided to follow that, and thanks to a lot of guidance from Simi, by the way. And I decided to follow that and really go for this legal templates business, and it did well pretty quickly. But what I didn't expect was, well, I didn't expect that either, but what I really didn't expect was for like a lot of stuff in my personal life to kind of blow up. So I had brain surgery pretty quickly after I started the business, had a really long, kind of tough recovery. Then my dad got leukemia, he had AML, and then my dad passed away from leukemia. And within a year of my dad passing away, my mom was killed. And so I had a lot going on. I had on the professional side this dream of writing a book. And it was like, oh, I'd really love to write a book. I had this kind of idea of how it had to be done, and I had these big lofty goals. But life kept getting in the way. Um, Now, more recently, I feel like I actually set out to do something more personal. Like, I feel like as my business got bigger and got a little bit unruly, sometimes I have my days where my business feels a little bigger than me. But I started to like work on personally detaching myself from my business and just not being like very wrapped up in its results or its the outcome, the vanity metrics, all this kind of stuff. And part of what's helped me to do that is having stuff I do outside my business has nothing to do with business, that sometimes I don't even share about or just don't share about very much, but that really is just for me. And so I had gotten invited actually to go to watch all my friends and from the gym, and my trainers at the gym back in June invited me to go watch them in this like crazy race called High Rocks. HYROX. And they were like, oh, you have to come. Well, they asked me if I wanted to do it first. And I was like, no, I can't do it. I had brain surgery. And like I really like identified with this kind of like injured bird. Like I was like a little injured bird and I can't participate in these things. It's not for me, it's for other people. So I went back in June. I watched all of them. And then I kind of realized staying there watching them, I mean, first of all, the like competitive athletic part of me was like, oh, I really want in on this. Like I just couldn't wait to jump in. But the other part of me was like, why did I decide up front that I couldn't do this? Like I haven't even tried. And that's when the idea was born to be like, well, what if I signed up for a high rocks race? And that's how that got started.
Oh, Sam, it's so incredible to hear you give a high level overview of life these last couple of years because you've been through so much and you've just continued to move forward through it all. And you are just a constant source of inspiration to me. And hearing about the High Rocks race is so cool because it started with you doing something that I think so many of us do. It's that we count ourselves out of something before we even give it a try. And it sounds like this person who wrote in this question is sort of in that same boat, right? Where
Mm,
she said she can already hear herself talking herself out of the thing that she actually wants to do. And so I'm wondering for you, like, what was it like to shift from that place of counting yourself out, self doubt, feeling like this is not even a possibility that I would entertain, to getting to a place where you felt like, yeah, you know what? Actually, maybe I could do this or maybe I could give this a try. What was that like for you?
yeah, I think I think letting go a lot of like perfectionist tendencies for me has centered around kind of taking on this like what's the worst thing that could happen attitude, right? So it was like, okay, I signed up for this. If I end up training for it and in the training I'm like, actually I can't do this. These races sell out in a heartbeat. So I was like, well, I'll just sell my ticket to someone else or give my ticket to someone else and I won't do it. And then I tried and it's like, I don't know, who really care? Like what's the loss? That was one thing. I think the other really big shift for me in this process was, as soon as you read the question, this was like the first thing I thought of was that I had to step back and be like, well, wait, what's my goal? Is my goal to finish it? Because I think a lot of times when we talk about races, and I think you can substitute this as a metaphor for pretty much anything else, whether it's building a business or doing anything else, we assume like the goal is to go do this race and like be amazing at it. I don't know, like finish a marathon in sub 3 hours or something like this. And it was like, you have taught me so much about black and white thinking. And it was like, it wasn't that I either compete in high rocks and like kill it and do it in an hour or sit out. It was like, well, what if I found a way to participate in this and just get it done? Like that was my goal, not to like hit any time or any weight or requirement or like in terms of strength, like that kind of stuff. So yeah, I just kind of stepped back and was like, well, wait, I'm not trying to like win this thing. I just want to participate in it. And so if I participate in it, then to the person who submitted this question, it's like, what if I don't hit all of my training in the training blocks? It's like, well, it wouldn't really matter because the reason that those training blocks, like for a half marathon, are so intense is to really help you get better and better and better with your time. What if you're a couple of minutes longer because you couldn't hit all your sessions? Who cares? You got it done.
It's so incredible the expectations and pressures that we place on ourselves. I think
Yeah.
sometimes without even realizing it, without even knowing it, right? I'm sure you weren't sitting there consciously thinking, if I do this race, I'm going to have to win it, or like I've got to have the best time ever, but like that feeling of it's got to be really great or else I'm not gonna do it at all is so, like, steeped into our subconscious that sometimes we don't even realize that it's happening, and we have to do some self-coaching around that to be able to
Mhm.
say, like, "Okay, I'm calling this out. This is all or nothing mindset. This is black and white thinking," and, like, there is a lot of gray in between, and maybe there's something there that I can embrace. So you work through the black and white thinking, you get to a place where you decide, "What's the worst that could happen?" I too am someone who it really helps me to just play, like, worst case scenario in my mind. I'm like, "Okay, worst case scenario, it's like, I would be okay. I could,
Mhm.
like, I could handle this worst case scenario that I'm feeling so afraid of that it's holding me back." And you sign up, and then you start training. What was that like for you?
Yeah, that was interesting because pretty close off the bat, I was like, I'm capable of a lot more than I thought I was. Like I
Mm.
actually wasn't injured like thought I was. I started pushing. So one of the things you do in high rocks is that you have to push this crazy sled that has 240 pounds, almost 240 pounds on it. It's so heavy. And in the beginning, when you start pushing it, you're like, is it moving? And when I started, I was like, I can't push that. Like, I was already making plans. Here's even another example. Like, I signed up to do high rocks doubles. I was already making plans for my doubles partner to do the whole sled push because I just assumed I couldn't do it. Like, I would do the rest of the race, but not that. So when I started out, I was like, well, how about we start low and slow and see? It's really funny how much this maps onto like my business strategy too. But I was like, let me try pushing the sled without weight and see if that hurts. And I pushed it because of where I had my brain surgery. It's just like the back of my neck and head hurts really bad. So I pushed it and it was fine. And so like a week later, I was like, let me add a 25-pound plate on it. And I just went really slowly. And same with running. Because I'm not really a runner. I never ran before. I'm kind of like up for anything when it comes to this stuff. So I have fun with all of it, but I had never done it before. So I just tried. I think though, Sim, that the hardest part was keeping my eyes on my own paper because the entire time I was training for this, other people at the gym are training for it. Then because, the social media gods are listening, so and then I started getting all this content about all these insane, intense people that were like training for high rocks. And it was so hard to have to keep coming back to my center to being like, I'm doing this for my reason, right? Like I'm not trying to win this thing. Everybody else may be trying to win this thing, but I don't need to do that. And it was very hard all summer to keep my head down.
Reconnecting with what matters most to you and not getting, like, swept up in other people's journeys or paths or stories, I think is so challenging. It's so
Yeah.
life-changing when we can do it, and I do think, to your point, it's not like a one and done thing for most people. Maybe there is some, like, comparison unicorn out there who's like, "I compared myself one time, and then I locked into my own lane, and I've never looked left or right from there on," but I think
Yeah.
for most of us, it's an acknowledgement that we don't want to live our lives in that place, in that way, and we have to keep, like, recentering. We have to keep bringing our eyes back to our own paper, like you said. Was there anything in particular that you felt helped you when you were moving through a moment of comparison for the High Rocks race, in business, whatever it might be? Like, what do you feel like is most supportive for you in those moments?
Yeah, I think personally recentering myself around like my story and kind of my journey into it and not and knowing that other people didn't know that. So when other people were putting maybe their expectations onto me saying, "Oh, I bet you could finish in an hour. I bet you could do this, or I bet you could do that." I was just thinking I'm kind of the only one that knows my story and like what I've been through. Sometimes I'm very visual, so sometimes I would actually look at this picture of the scar on the back of my head from my
Yeah.
surgery because that would just help me to be like, wow, I just can't believe it. Like I remember what it was like to recover from that. And I also would tap in and just kind of remember back to like when I first had the surgery. I mean, first of all, to learn how to walk again, I have a video of me walking with Ryan for the first time. But I would watch that and I would also remember how I would try to go out for a run, like maybe a year after I had brain surgery. I would try to just like run around the block and like just start to get back into exercise. I would be in so much pain. I would be like debilitated for a week to 10 days probably, couldn't move my neck, couldn't move my shoulders. It was horrible. And I was like, the fact that I was even doing any of this, whether it took me 16 hours to complete it, I was just like, wow, how far I've come, right? So I think in those moments of comparison, sometimes we have a tendency, I find that we kind of measure the distance between where we are now and where we'd like to be or where we maybe see other people. And what I like to do is kind of think about where I am now versus where I used to be and be like, whoa, I've actually come a far way. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing.
Totally. And as someone on the outside looking in on your life, when I hear about this whole process for you from brain surgery to completing this high rocks race, like training for it, completing it, all of that, I think I'm like, dang, this is like more inspiring than someone who, just picked up and did it and won the race. And so it makes me emotional as your friend to think that anything would have made you feel anything but just like so proud of yourself. And I think that's what comparison does, is it really can distract us from our own growth and
Mhm.
our own just like our own amazingness. You know what I mean? Like what you did was truly amazing. And to think that just because maybe someone else could push the sled like faster or sooner or whatever it might be, that it would make you feel anything less than just incredible. This is such a great example for people to hear because I think it's easier to see in someone else than it
Mm.
is for us to see in ourselves in those moments. It's such a great example of how unhelpful and untrue comparison is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so often these things are lessons to us that just like keep driving this message home because it is something that, I struggle with to think I should be doing more always or better or whatever. And even Ryan, my own husband, he is the kind of guy who he participated in High Rocks too. He barely trained. He did, I mean, probably a quarter of what I did. He hates running. So he was like, I'm not going to run. I'm just going to ride the bike. And I was like, you can't ride the bike. You have to run. And he was like, where does it say you have to run? Whose rule? Like I mean, you have to run the race. But he was like, who said that you can't do that for training? And so, like, even he was challenging some of my own rules that I had built in my head of like, that this couldn't be adaptable or like flexible in some way. Ryan killed it. Ryan did so good. He finished in an hour and 12 minutes. He did so good, and it was funny to watch him even like, he doesn't have the injury or the history that I have, but he certainly had that attitude of like, "You know what? I'm gonna, like, do my own thing. If that's not good enough, oh, well, like, I'll be fine." It was very helpful.
Yeah. And it people who believe in themselves enough to try something are the people who like get to have those experiences. If we count ourselves out, if we hold ourselves back, if we are like paralyzed with
Mm,
the fear of failure, that perfectionism paralysis, like you are never going to get to have the experience because you're never going to try. And it's so cool to hear stories about Ryan, like people like Ryan who are like, no, I don't need to do this perfectly. I believe in myself, like I'm going to do my best, and then he gets to have this awesome experience. It's like awesome
mhm.
experiences are only available to people who show up for those experiences.
Yeah, I know, and to the person who submitted the question, like, I feel like I really learned from Ryan to say, like, he was just like, who said that this has to be like miserable training? Like even to hear the way that this person maybe is talking about the training of like, oh, I might have to miss a session. It's like, I mean, hopefully that's good. Hopefully you're living your life. Like, hopefully you have other stuff going on outside of this. Like, I wasn't willing to make this my life. I talked about this on Instagram yesterday where I was like, first of all, I have a very busy business, but I was also wanting to do other stuff like training. I'm not a professional athlete. Like, I just wanted to do this for fun. And so
Totally.
yeah, like, it was okay, but you know what was so interesting? It was like, I felt like, what we're talking about, I had to work on it a lot over the summer as you're training, and yeah, like you said, I would veer off path, I would look up from my paper here and there and then be like, "Oh, shoot, I have to look down again." But then comes the race day, and you're standing there with thousands of women who are strong and in incredible shape and have probably been doing this for longer than me, right? And for most people, they made everybody raise their hand at the beginning. Whose first race is this? Who's done one before? Most of them had done it before. It's like, so you're standing there and you're literally like this little corral to come out of this big Red Bull start line. And it all comes flooding back to be like, who the heck did I think I was to do this thing? What an idiot. I felt like so stupid. Like my little like loose training plan was, had completely not prepared me. And all these people, I mean, I made up stories about all of them, but they clearly all trained more than me, that they were stronger, the faster, the whole thing. And even as you're physically racing, you're getting lapped. You're watching people finish while you're still going. It's like there were so many reminders, so many, like, it was an overwhelming amount of having to come back to me like, "I'm doing my own thing, I'm doing my own thing, it's okay." It was very hard.
I can imagine that that was so challenging when you're
Mhm.
put in a room with all of those other people and it's just so in your face. And also when you're actively participating and like you said, people are lapping you. I will never forget one time when I was running a marathon, I literally got passed by a man. I bet he was 80. He was wearing Crocs. And he ran right by me and I was just like, "Wow, this is so humbling that this man in Crocs just like totally
Blew my
blew
doors off.
past me."
Yeah, I had a lot of those moments. I was like,
Yes.
what is happening?" But you have to in those moments. I mean, like, especially if you've been through anything, you're like, I mean, first of all, you have to come back to your own goal. My goal wasn't to win it. So it was like, okay. And I was also realistic about the fact that I was like, maybe they did train a lot more than me, right? I chose not to train like this. And if they did, good for them. They deserve to run faster, or jump higher, or whatever. Like, I don't really care. I didn't do it. So, like, I can't stand there and expect to get the same result. Like, I feel like you almost have to be realistic about that too. Is like, I was okay with that happy balance. Like, I didn't want to train so hard. And in exchange for that, I don't win the darn thing. And that's okay.
Totally. And you set goals and you took action also according to your personal values. Like you said,
Mm,
you were not interested in the training for this race becoming like your whole life or your whole personality. You have other things that you love and that are important to you. And it needed to weave in with those things. It couldn't take over all your days, all your weekends, your whole life. And I think when you are able to step back and say, okay, I see how this fits in with the bigger picture of who
mm,
I am and how I'm choosing to live my life. Because in those moments, we can be so zoomed in that we forget, like, oh, I'm a whole person outside of this race or outside of this gym or whatever it might be, outside of this moment and outside of this business. And being able to step back and say, I have to look at the whole picture, how this fits into my life, how this fits into my story. And when I see it like that, like, does it make sense for me?
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is so true for business too. Like, for one, I think sometimes you just have to do something like to almost run through it. And sometimes I think as business owners, we put a lot of pressure on like doing things for the first time. I mean, it's like our version of winning. Like, I feel like people will put out a product and then be like, "Oh, I hope to sell X number of things or make X number of money." And it's like that's a lot of pressure on a first time. Like, we don't even know. We have to do a little bit of a dry run. So I thought the same for this. It was like, "Oh, it's my first time. I don't even know if I'm gonna like it." Like, maybe the person that submitted this question, like, you go to run, you're like, "I don't even like running." So it's like, I don't know, maybe they're an experienced runner, but you just don't know until you try. And so there was some of that too, to just be like, yeah, I think like Ryan said, like, you don't have to strangle it to death to make it so miserable. And some of the people we were training with, they're like, "Are you hitting your protein right after every, training session? And are you doing this and taking creatine? And then don't forget to do that." I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. I'm just like showing up. Like, I don't know, guys. I'm just like trying to make it work.
Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
love that. Are you hitting your protein?
I was just
I'm like
like,
literally just imagining you like hitting a piece like
yeah.
a chicken. You're just like, I hit it.
I couldn't with the meat anymore. I'm like, I can't do it. Yeah, it's not easy.
What was it like for you when you did finish the race? Like,
Oh.
what did that feel like for you? What did you feel? What did you think? Like, what was that like?
Well, I have this great video. I collapsed as I ran across the finish line and then just like fell onto the stage in a
Amazing.
very dramatic fashion. My mom would have been very proud. But I like fell onto the stage and basically just looked like an angel, like snow angel. And I just remember that the photographer like ran up to me and took a bunch of like overhead shots because he thought it was so funny. I just kept muttering to myself, like, "I can't believe I did it. I can't believe I did it. I can't believe I finished." The whole time I was racing, I kept saying, "Why did I do this?" And, like, "Whose idea was this?" This was so hard. But yeah, I really just could not believe I finished it. I think for days on end, I just kept walking around being like, "I can't believe I finished." I've been sitting here with my little, like, finisher patch on my desk because 'cause I'm like, "I need to be reminded that I did this," because I'm like, I see the videos, I'm like, "I did that? I can't believe it."
That's incredible, Sam. And it's so it's so wild to have that feeling inside yourself of I just really like surprised myself. Like this
Mhm.
is something that I didn't know that I was going to be able to do or I didn't know if it was going to happen and then I just did it. What do you feel like that does for you when you have a moment like that, an experience where you just feel like you so exceeded like what you believed was possible for you. And of course, that's because of consistency and showing up and not perfection, but
Mhm.
consistency. I think those are two very different things. And working through the mental blocks that come up along the way, you can look back and say, like, okay, I see how this happened, but I wasn't sure if it was going to happen since it was my first time doing it. What's that been like for you?
Yeah, I think 2 things I took away from it were, one is that you see, like, you're able to zoom out after you've done something, then I feel like you're able to zoom out and see how all the little things you did added up, maybe that you didn't even realize along the way, how they added up to allowing you to do this versus, like, yeah, I mean, first of all, there were weeks and weeks. I got COVID for the very first time while I was training for this. After all this time, never getting COVID. I got COVID for the first time in August and I wasn't able to go to the gym for weeks and weeks. I couldn't breathe. So there were all these things of forget missing a run or two in a week. It was big chunks of time that I had to. I was away for all of October, but in the moment I was freaking out, like, oh, I'm off my plan, right? I'm not executing this plan perfectly, or I'm not even doing most of what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think once I, excuse me, once I finished I was like, "Oh, I see how, like, all the little" like, it was more about the consistency over time, not, like, missing things here and there, not missing weeks here and there, and so that was really helpful. I think the other cool thing that is probably still settling in a little bit is, like, you can't help but have this bug afterwards where you're like, "Well, wait, if I did that, like, what else can I do?" And I was just
Yes.
curious about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. It's that
Mhm.
feeling of like, "Oh my gosh, what is possible for me? Like, what am I capable of?" When you surprise yourself, I think that's the coolest thing that happens. It, like, opens up your brain to feeling like, "Wow, there are things I might be counting myself out of right now
Mhm.
that I could do, and it could be amazing."
Yeah, I know. And like, what's the harm in trying for all this other stuff? I do think you start taking a little bit of an inventory of like all these stories you tell yourself of like, oh, I'm not the kind of person who, or that's a them thing, not a me thing. I think you start to unravel that a bit and being like, maybe I shouldn't be counting myself out of that. And it's interesting because even in the business, I see this where every time I have a launch, I think it's not going to be that great or it's not going to be as good as the last one. And then pretty much every time it's been bigger than the time before. And we just keep joking because every lunch we have is the biggest lunch ever because it does just keep getting bigger. And
Totally.
and then afterwards I do think like, okay, maybe this is showing me like this is kind of working. I've proven the concept at this point. So I think like maybe I could push myself and stretch myself a little bit. I mean, my book that's coming out is a major stretch. I feel like Gumby right now. I feel like it is pushing and pulling me in directions that I do not feel like going in, but they're all positive things. It's just very uncomfortable. And yeah, I think it does even when they're not things like running high rocks had nothing to do with business, but it does still give me that confidence in the back of my mind that's like, well, all right, maybe I could try because it tends to go a little bit better than I think.
Totally. Well, and
Yeah.
even with your experience with this book, like
Mhm.
you had a big goal about the publisher that you wanted to
Mhm.
go with. And then you took steps, you took small steps consistently, and you got is it one of the big five publishers, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's the second largest in the world. They so my when I got my agent Wendy, who I love, she was like before we started shopping the proposal around, she was just like, I want to let you know that the book industry went through a huge boom during COVID. Like everybody got a book published, and publishers are pulling back a little bit, not publishing as much, blah, blah, blah. And so you might want to adjust your expectation to get a big five book deal. It's very difficult. And there are a lot of wonderful publishers out there. And I was like, yeah, 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 Wendy, we're gonna try. Like, just try, because what's the harm in trying? I mean, I don't know why I had that attitude, but I just was like, let's start there. I'm not gonna start, where somewhere else. So yeah, and we got it pretty much right away.
It's incredible. And
Mhm.
I love that mantra, like, what's the harm in trying? And I feel like you've given so many amazing examples of like, well, there might be like some really great stuff when you try.
Mhm.
It could be so amazing. When you were in the process of writing the book, editing the book, and now, getting ready for this book to be out in the world, do you feel like there were moments of internal resistance or feel fear of failure or counting yourself out of things along the way that showed up for you?
Absolutely. I mean, there's it's been a real roller coaster. I would say, I mean, from getting the deal to being like they're not going to take me, or I was very adamant. For example, I did not want to write a book about legal stuff, and so I was like very bullish on this. Like, if you're going to take me, you're not going to make me write a book about legal. So to also get like a publisher who was like, yeah, we don't want you to write a book about legal stuff. No one wants to read it. So I was like, oh, thank goodness. Yeah. So I was, like, so relieved, but that was, like, a big doubt or concern, is, like, anybody going to I've built up this whole legal business, like, who's gonna listen to me about marketing stuff, which is funny because that's all people ask me about, like, behind the scenes, is that, my friends and everything are always asking me about this, so that was another part where it's like, "Well, what's the harm in trying?" Like, it's not gonna hurt my legal business, so let's try it, and so there's that. I doubted myself as a writer many, many times. It's very hard to go through. I think after having our kinds of businesses for so long too, where, we write an email and we're like, this email is great. And we like send it out and no one says anything, to getting a like world-class editor who rips everything to shreds. It was a experience, and it was a learning experience. It was so helpful, but I couldn't help but then every time I would go back to writing being like, oh my gosh, she's just gonna rip this apart. This is so hard.
Mhm.
That was very hard, and then I would say now I'm on, like, the media end of it, where we're starting to do all these big interviews, and, like, they're asking me to do all these appearances, and I'm just like, "Oh, I'm not the kind of person." Like, they said something the other day in the meeting with the publisher's marketing team about me going on TV, and I was like, "No, no, I don't have to go on TV, like, I'm not the no, like, I have a little, like, online business, we can go on, like, Instagram." And they were like, "No, this book, like, anyone can buy this book." Even, like, getting out of the mindset, like, I've built this business online for very specific, like, niche of people like us, to be like, "Oh, I wrote a book that, like, other people can read." It's a much
Yes.
wider audience than I'm used to, and so I have to, like, open myself to this possibility.
Oh my gosh, Sam, I just feel like everything that you're sharing, it's like, I mean, I don't play video games, but we got a Switch for his 8th birthday,
Yeah.
and it's so funny. All my fears about video games, I was like, I don't want him to be like alone in his room, like gaming. And like the reality is that he doesn't play that often, but when he does, he wants the entire family like sitting there watching him play. So he's
I
like
love this.
the opposite of isolated. He like wants an audience like while he's playing this Minecraft video game. And it's so interesting to see his process
Mm.
when he gets stuck or, like when he dies and he has to like repeat a level and he gets so frustrated. But then when he up levels, he's like, oh my gosh, I just did that. I up leveled. And I feel like I'm almost seeing that for you. It's like, oh, you are just up leveling like over and over and over again in the, like, mindset way, where I feel like the limits or the perceived limits or who you feel like need to be or who you are, who you aren't, it's like life just keeps helping you to, like, blast through those and see any of this is possible for you if you want it. Like, not that you have to do any of this, but if
Mm.
you want it, like, why not you?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I keep saying how uncomfortable I am with all of this, and that I don't like the attention. I'm worried about the attention. I'm worried about the exposure. And my mindset coach, Jen, she's like, isn't that interesting that you went and got a book deal then? Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Like, it was just gonna like sell
Totally.
itself. I was like, oh, she's like, I think there's like a part of you that like is really excited about being in Barnes& and Noble. I was like, "Well, kind of." Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that you're gonna get to celebrate that part of you and see your book in Barnes& and Noble, and it's gonna be so incredible, and I know that your story and the way that you're sharing in this book is just gonna be so transformational for everyone who reads it. I truly cannot wait to get to read this and to see how you've grown, like, over all of these years and all of this time. Like, it's just inspiring to be in your life, to be in your presence, and now so many people are gonna get to have that inspiration, like, right in their own home, right in their own hands when they get your book.
Well, thank you, Sim. Well, I appreciate it. I also talk all the time about you, about how like just foundational and cornerstone you were to my start and to like you being an example of somebody who went out and did this. Like, I think it's just so important for people to see examples of what's possible for themselves. And you were 1,000,000% that for me. And I would not have been able to do it or to keep doing it. That's for sure.
Oh, thank you so much, Sam. I am so glad we got to have this chat. I hope that this listener is going to go out, sign up for this half marathon, and just think, like, why not try? And I love how you said start low and slow. I am
Yeah.
going to repeat that to myself like over and over again. It's such great advice, it's such great wisdom. And it's amazing to see what, embracing that has created for you in your life.
Yeah, and can I tell her something before she goes
Yes,
out and races this
please.
race? So, I just encourage you to have fun with it, and when I just did High Rocks last weekend, there were, like, little girls on the sidelines watching, and I would run over and, like, go give them high fives. I was probably wasting so much time, adding so much time to my race, but, like, again, coming back to that goal that you have and, like, having a good time with it, don't let it be so serious. Life is serious enough, so just go and have fun with it.
Absolutely. That's such great advice, Sam, and I'm getting teary thinking about you high-fiving those
They
girls,
were so cute.
it's like
Yeah.
maybe it did take you a few minutes to do that
Mhm.
and added a little bit of time, but you don't know, that could be a moment that for them was life-changing because like you said, it's so valuable when we can see examples of what's possible. It's like, "Oh, that person did it, like, maybe it's possible for me," and so you don't know, maybe one of those girls is changed because you took the extra minute to go give her a high five.
Yeah, I wanted her to see a strong woman with biceps and thighs that could crush a coconut and
I
everything
love
else.
it.
Yeah,
I
they
love
were
it.
having fun. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, you are such a strong woman, and I'm just so grateful that you came on the podcast with me today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam.